I got a little treat for you. Back in 2010, Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula under its emir Anwar al-Awlaki had basically been the influence behind an online propaganda machine. And basically, Al Qaeda wanted to reach future jihadists online, which was the war for your mind, basically, the disenfranchised mind of the poorest regions in the Arab world. And it's during the U.S. war on terrorism, there was a new war that was taking place, which is basically propaganda, right? Online propaganda. And as the internet exploded on the scene, Al Qaeda, which has been, the very first terrorist organization in the world to use media as a propaganda tool to reach new recruits around the world, they perfected during the mid 2000s after 15, 20 years of initially trying to get new recruits through the advent of the internet. And the magazine that they created was called Inspire. And it was published, the first issue was published in July of 2010. Now, this is what the magazine looked like, right? I have a number of these magazines. I don't know where you can download these from anymore, but many years ago, I downloaded the first cachet, I think the first 17 issues, basically. And there was a number of individuals that were interviewed for the very first edition. Osama bin Laden was one, Dr. Ayman al Zawahiri was another, and of course, Ayman al Zawahiri was another. And what I want to go to one, page 32 here, because I want to read you something that is basically really concerning, right? So what happened was, uh, as the Mujahideen fighters began to regroup, I mean, they were being decimated at this point, but Al Qaeda affiliates outside of Afghanistan, specifically in the Islamic Maghreb and the Arabian Peninsula, had been reforming to a much more expansive organization. So the Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, for example, have been building up to the point where they are now considered an international threat, but not, as Al Qaeda was, say, in the years 1998 to 2001. The Al Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb now is much bigger and much more a threat than they previously were before. But this is the mindset of these people because they play the long game. And in this one area of the chat of the magazine, I want to show you the long game that they're talking about trying to reach potential recruits to Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and on how to inflict damage to the enemy. And how do they go about doing that? Well, you don't have to come to Yemen. You don't have to come to the Sudan. You don't have to come to uh, the Islamic Maghreb or anywhere outside the country. If you are in your home, we'll teach you how to make a bomb. And the chapter we're going to read is basically to that. So a year later, basically, Osama bin Laden would be assassinated. And a couple of years later after that, Dr. Ayman al Zawahiri would be assassinated. So Al Qaeda in Afghanistan would be quite decimated. Their hierarchy just basically destroyed, fractured, but now they're regrouping in Afghanistan. Now we have another group, which is just as burgeoning as the one in Afghanistan, and that's Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So here you have part of the magazine. It says here, open source jihad. And you got to give them credit because they really do push the propaganda tool online very hard in any way like the CIA does, right? A resource manual, those who loathe the tyrants, includes bomb making techniques, security measures, guerrilla tactics, weapons training, and all other jihadi related activities. I hear it all the time. Al Qaeda is nothing more than a bunch of disenfranchised Muslims who are basically CIA assets. Now, that may be true in the broader sense in regards to, say, them fighting another preconceived enemy, which is the Arab nationalists. countries like Syria, for example, where the CIA would go to these, ultra Salafist sects, right? Like Al Nusra, the Islamic State, Ansar al Sharia, Ansar al Islam, these groups like this, and basically give them monies through proxies, Saudi proxies, and because they don't want to be seen giving them to them directly, so they go through Saudi proxies, United Arab Emirates, right, Qatar, right. So they give funding, they give weapons to these groups in the hopes of fighting who other Muslims, right. So you have a civil war in Libya, you have a civil war in Syria, and quite unrest. At this point, both countries were under duress from Islamists, and here you have Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula publishing a magazine and how to, manipulate, propagandize the young, disenfranchised mind of the Arab youth, just like the CIA does with regular TV, right? But in this case, Al Qaeda doesn't have a standing military. So what do? They go online through the dark web or through private, Islamist channels, and they publish there. But online, so what they wanted to do was basically publish an online magazine, and it lasted for a long time. So informal, a disaster for the repressive imperialist nations. The open source jihad is America's worst nightmare, and that's true. It allows Muslims to train at home instead of risking a dangerous travel abroad. Remember, Al Qaeda, like I said, adapts very well. The 9/11 hijackers came from different areas, Egypt, Lebanon, right? And they had to go to where? Afghanistan to train, where they would be monitored, easily tracked. Here, they can propagandize you over the internet. Well, you don't have to travel. What are they going to do? Monitor the internet? Well, now they do. But it's hard to get, right? Look no further. The open source jihad is now at hand's reach. Remember, this is 2010. Just think about the propaganda that they use today, right? Look what it says here. Make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom. The Al Qaeda chef. Listen, this is nothing to laugh about, though. But look at the really, obtuse in your face. Like make a bomb in the kitchen of your mom. And the conservatives will fall over this. This is what Islam teaches. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. These are not Muslims. These are murderers in the name only, right? Just like you wouldn't say that the Christian sects in North Africa represent you, right? Or that evangelical Christians in the United States, the Southern racists, they don't represent you, right? I'll blow this up and we'll read it. Can I make an effective bomb that causes damage to the enemy from ingredients available in my kitchen in the world? The answer is yes. But before how, we ask why. It is because Allah says. So fight in the cause of Allah. You are not held responsible except for yourself. And inspire the believers to join you, that perhaps Allah will restrain the military might of those who disbelieve. And Allah is greater in might and stronger in exemplary punishment. Al-Nisa 84. They're taking the quote out of context. They're talking about the battle in the field against the polytheists. Not here. There's no connection to here. Because if you go to Al-Qaeda, if you go to the Quran, I think it's in Al-Medina. Again, I refer to you what the Prophet Muhammad says, that if you take one life, it's as if you killed all of mankind. Whereas if you save one life, it's as if you saved mankind. You are not to kill out of emotion or out of what you perceive to be justice. Leave that for God. So what does it say here? And it is also because every Muslim is required to defend his religion and nation. The Jews and, I'll have to the Jews and Christians have dishonored the Muslims, desecrated our holy places, and cursed the beloved prophet. Today, they are holding contests for the best blasphemy of Muhammad. This was at a time in France where they would, write cartoons and make fun of the Prophet Muhammad. Pious Muslims would basically just, dismiss it offhand. Yeah, they would be offended, but they're not going to go and kill you for it. But those who are overly religious and who already are disenfranchised by U.S. foreign policy are easy to propagandize. You destroy my life. You bomb my neighborhoods. You kill my mother or father or both. I'm going to join the very organizations that are going against you. So that, you don't have to make up terrorists out of thin air. You create them. And how do you by doing that? By going to war or funding a war against Muslims in nations, and they create Islamist organizations themselves. The Western governments today are waging a relentless war against Islam. They put together a coalition and have the support of their population invading and destroying Muslim land. But there is a small band of sincere Muslims who are striking back at the enemy. The efforts of the small group of mujahideen who had a great effect in hindering the plan of the enemy. So now we have a balance of forces. As they kill Muslims, Muslims respond by killing among them. This is the effect of a small group of sincere mujahideen. So who would be affected? The Muslim Ummah wakes up. They're talking about trying to reach a bigger Islamic army to fight against the far enemy, which is the West. But how do you go about doing that? Well, this has been a war that's been waged since 9/11. So those who want to believe that the Islamists pose no threat, well, they have long memories. They know what's going on in Gaza. They know what's going on in Yemen. They know what's going on in Sudan. They know what's going on in Syria and Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Pakistan. And in a lot of those places, who's the constant? The United States, Israel, the Saudi government, all enemies to these Islamists. Yes, even the Saudi government, who they consider too westernized. Bin Laden said that too. There are many Muslims who have the zeal to defend the Ummah, but their vision is unclear. They believe that in order to defend the Ummah, they need to travel and join the Mujahideen elsewhere, and they must train in the camp. But we must tell Muslims in America and Europe that there is a better choice, and an easy one to give support to your Ummah. That is individual work inside the West, such as the operations of Nidal Hassan and Faisal Shahid. These are the people that Nidal Hassan was at Fort Hood. He's the Fort Hood shooter. I forgot who Faisal Shahid was, but Nidal Hassan was the Fort Hood shooter, where he could do damage inside the United States by shooting up in army barracks. And he did. This didn't catch on for a long time. And now Al Qaeda, as I'm reading to you, Saifa Adil's manual, which is 33 Strategies of War, which is now being taught in Islamist training camps in Afghanistan and Syria, right, mainly in Afghanistan, that we are to use unorthodox guerrilla tactics to defeat the West. Right? They were talking about it in this magazine. This is 2010, 15 years prior to the publication of 33 Strategies of War. With a few failed operations, as they claimed, the director of national intelligence was forced to resign. With a few more failed operations, we may have the resignation of the president of the United States. Think big or go home. My Muslim brother, who wants to support the religion of Allah. Do not make too many calculations of forecasting as result in consequences. It is true that Umar al-Farouk and his brothers, Nidal Hassan and Shazid, were imprisoned. Farouk, I think, was the underwear bomber. But they have become heroes and icons that are examples to be followed. Remember, all these people were arrested. Farouk, Hassan, Shazid, right? Because they're trying to get to the mind of the individual. Hey, listen, just because they got arrested doesn't mean that they're legends. They still tried in the name of Allah, right? So you should try too. And people are just going to not everyone's a murderer, right? It takes a long time to propagandize somebody. some longer than others. And that's what this magazine's about. We ask Allah to grant them steadfastness. If they were sincere and steadfast, their imprisonment would be an increased status for them. The Hadith says, and this is, listen, the majority of all Islamist groups, whether it's Al Qaeda, the Islamic State, Jaish-e-Muhammad, whatever, right? It comes from the Hadith, not from the Quran. The Hadiths, the scholars, Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Uthamin, Muhammad Hassan, right? Ibn Baz, the former Grand Mufti of Saudi Arabia, all these people that are basically Sayyid Qutb, Hassan al-Banna, right? These are the early influences where they mixed Hadith with Quran. Hadiths are the memoirs attributed to the words, attributed words to the Prophet Muhammad. The Quran is the word of Muhammad and through God. But when you're talking to illiterates who will believe anything, just like if you are in a church and you talk to a bunch of illiterate, Southerners that don't read the Bible and are not, theologians by any means necessary, they're easy to manipulate. I mean, take a look at what they believe now. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at the Trump base now and look what they believe. They're the crazy 9/11 theories. They're the ones who propagate the real ridiculous theories. And when you do this, you get fear and violence, because violence comes from people who are confused and are led by their emotions, primitive emotions, their base emotions. They're violent, right? The result of these trials would be the highest levels of paradise, the pleasure of Allah. Heaven is in the hearts of the world and eternal pleasure in the afterlife. That's what they're trying to get the believer to believe, that through your efforts, whether you fail or not, you'll still be rewarded in paradise. These people are very religious, but they're not pious. That's the meaning. That's the essence. Piety, morality. That's what's missing. Empathy. But again, they're trying to manipulate them to use their emotions and their vitriol outward. Because when you're led by emotions, you do what? You make mistakes, right? You take a look at these Islamists later on in life, and they regret their choices. In the Philippines, they have a program, a de-radical program for former Abu Sayyaf fighters, and it worked. They wrote a report stating the man who was in charge of it. I don't know his name, but I read it through many years ago because my studies involve Abu Sayyaf, which was an Al Qaeda affiliate, and one of the biggest terrorist attacks of all time, which are the Bali bombings. Okay, in Jemaah Islamiyah. I'm sorry. Jemaah Islamiyah was involved in that. Hambali, Ridwan Ismudin, that's his name. Anyway, these people are basically, those who come from very poor backgrounds, who are thoroughly illiterate, poor, and are dedicated to an emir who takes care of them. And taking care of them, like giving them money to eat. And they're easy to basically maneuver mentally. If you're sincere in your intention to serve in the religion of Allah, then what you have to do is enter your kitchen. Now read this at the bottom here, okay? Right here. Enter your kitchen and make an explosive device that would damage the enemy. If you put your trust in Allah and then use this explosive device properly, here are the main qualities of the bomb. Now, you must be thinking, who did this influence, right? Who did this influence? Okay. You get what I'm saying? The Snardev brothers, who did what? The Boston bombings, 7 years later. This is how they made the bomb. like I said, it takes a while to get to break somebody and manipulate them and propagandize them and mold them into something that you're trying to direct, control. It's all about control. Its ingredients are readily available. Buying these ingredients does not raise suspicion. It is easily disposed of if the enemy searches your home. Sniffing dogs are not trained to recognize them as making ingredients, bomb making ingredients. In 1 or 2 days, the bomb could be ready to kill at least 10 people. In a month, make a bigger and more lethal bomb and kill tens of people. And that's exactly what the Snyder brothers did through the influence of Inspire magazine. And look, it shows you, look, it says preparation of it. So it shows you all like, look at, it tells you how to make a bomb. This magazine's telling you how to make a bomb. This is how they do it. Every intricate part of making a bomb. If you think this is a joke, it's not a joke. This is the real fucking deal. Right? Now, fast forward to the year 2025. Here we are, right? Now we have the director of the National Counterterrorism Center basically Joe Kent, putting out a spotlight report about the threat of Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the ones behind this Inspire magazine. It's not fake. I know there are some people that are saying, "Oh, these are CIA controlled." This. No, not necessarily. No, these are real organizations. They have real motivations. Are they controlled in a way that they can be? Sure, but they don't need to be controlled to attack you. They'll be glad to do it. It's easy. This is the problem with having an open-ended relationship with freedom, right? The freedom of movement. And this is exactly what's going to come under fire if we have a next terrorist attack. And COVID was exactly that test. How to control your movement and how to erode certain liberties given unto you through the Constitution. Because the ultimate war is not just for your mind, but also for your civil liberties. Not everything is as it seems, but sometimes things are just the way they are. And if you think that terrorism is basically manufactured, not in the way you think it is. Bin Laden was a real person. 9/11 was a real incident. What came after is what should be studied. What came before is what should be studied. The attacks themselves happened. Bali bombing, 9/11, the embassy bombing, 1993 World Trade Center bombing, right? These are real incidents. But what led up to these incidents and what came after is what we need to concentrate on. Because we could find the perpetrators who benefit from these attacks specifically, right? But to understand that, you have to understand the mindset of this enemy. And it is an enemy. But how do we defeat this mindset? With more violence? More violence makes these people in the first place. It's not our fault. It's not the government's fault totally. But the reciprocating violence only exists through violence. So how do we stop terrorism? Well, for one, we have to understand the mindset of the terrorist. Why are they attacking us? What's their motivation? Now, the State Department will lie to you and say they hate our freedoms. That's what they said about 9/11. And that's not true, because Al Qaeda would have media interviews where they basically told you it was about your foreign policy, which is true. And that's what we also have to study. What is it about our foreign policy that these Islamists hate? Why? And that's what the State Department don't want you to ask. They don't want you to know why. They just want you to be afraid and dependent on them and hate them. And by extension, hey, maybe we should start hating the people who are like them. And they're nothing like them. Stop leading by your emotions. Start thinking with your head. And that's what this channel is about. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Take care.